section 6.4. We're only going to have time for one example because I want to explain this. It's going to be quick, I promise. And the rest of our day, probably like tomorrow, is just going to be practicing this stuff, all right? Because honestly, this is one thing you have to be pros at. Everything else in this class, like Chapter 7, not so much Chapter 8, Chapter 10, Chapter 11, it all revolves around, or at least it does involve factoring. So here's an example about what I'm talking about. Old stuff, right? Old stuff. What would you use here? It actually doesn't factor, but you would try it. And if it did factor, you'd go directly to your factors with a shortcut. Are you understanding that? Okay. Now, as soon as I do that, you still have the same basic ideas in that first question. Is it in order?
Yes.
That's great. Is the first term positive?
Yes.
If it's not, you'd factor the negative out. That would act like a GCF. Does it have a GCF besides 1? Okay, so you're all good as far as that goes, but the problem we have here is that we have an A that's not 1. That doesn't mean you switch everything up. That just means that instead of going directly from here to here, you have that extra step I was referring to. So, diamond problem part 2. We are still going to put B here. Still going to do that. Now, do you remember, hopefully you understand why I did what I did. You understand that the reason why I had you always do A times C, even though A was 1 all the time, was for this. So you get in the habit of going, oh yeah, A times C goes here. A, even though it's 1, it looks like it's just the C, but it's 1 times this goes here. Well, what's our A?
3.
What's our C?
6.
What's A times C?
18.
That's what's going to go here. It's going to be A times C that goes there. Same as before. It's exactly the same as before. Show of hands if you feel okay with it so far. Well, you should, right? Because it's exactly the same as before. Now, we're still going to find our 2 numbers. But what you're not going to do, you're not going to do this. Why not?
Because it won't work.
I know it's not going to work. Why won't it work?
A is not 1.
Yep. Because if I do this, if I do x times, how much is x times x?
X squared.
I don't have an x squared. X times x is not going to give me my a back. That doesn't work. The only thing that will work here is doing the factoring by grouping. And that was the whole idea. That's why in the previous examples, the ones I gave you in the last section, that's why I said, well, you know, you can do it with the shortcut, or if you forget the shortcut, you can split it up and you can use the grouping. That is what is necessary here. There is no shortcut. This is the long way every time if your A is not 1. So one last time. When can you go directly to your factors? If A is 1. And if A is not 1, you have this method. Here's what we do. We do our, so this is for ax squared plus bx plus c. It's a little redundant. So here's what you do. I've already done it for you in the last section, but again, I'm going to show it to you here. How many terms do we have?
3.
We're going to use these 2 numbers to make it 4 terms. We're splitting it up. And the reason why we can do this, these 2 numbers have to add to this one, correct? If they have to add to this one, that means I can separate this term, this b, into 2 different terms. So I'll have ax squared plus number 1x plus number 2x plus c. And then I'll factor by grouping. That's the whole idea. So let's go through this example. This example one time. I'm going to go kind of quickly. Next time we'll get a lot of practice, so bear with me here. Just want to make sure that I at least give you something before you leave and don't leave you hanging. So 3x squared plus 11x plus 6. Okay, super fast. Is it in order?
Yes.
Yes.
Is the first term positive?
Yes.
Yes.
Do I have a GCF?
No.
Okay, how many terms do I have?
Three.
What do I use for 3 terms?
Diamond.
Diamond. That's always the process. What goes up top?
11.
Does 6 go here?
No.
Why not?
Because it's 8 times C.
Okay, so A is 3, C is so 18. We are still going to find two numbers that add to 11, our top number or B, and multiply to 18. Can you think of them?
9.
Yeah, they're both positive, 9 and 2. Would it be a good idea if I did x plus 9 and x plus 2?
No, because it wouldn't give you.
This makes me sad. Don't do that. You're going to break my heart, so crying. No, don't do that, okay? What this is you only do this if A is what?
1.
If A is not 1, now we go through the group. Remember, I told you, even if you forget about the shortcut, you can still solve the problem by doing the grouping. And that's what you have to do here. We keep the 3x squared. We're using these numbers to split this up. Plus 9x, plus 2x. Notice, please, this is still 11x. Do you see it? Plus 6. And then what we have, we change 3 terms into 4 terms so that we can do our grouping. And this should be old stuff for us. We already know how to do that. And we finish off with our factor. And that's completely factored. So a continuation of factoring, and we're still factoring these type of problems, but I do want to make sure that you're going through the process, the thought process, every single time when we see these. So if you remember from last time, what's the first thing we check for anytime we are factoring anything? The first thing, it's not GCF. The order. We want to make sure these things are on the correct order. Is this an order for us?
Yes.
Order means x squared, x number. So is it in order?
Yes.
Yeah. Next thing we check, is the first term positive? Because if it's not, our techniques really don't work that well. Is the first term positive?
Yes.
Okay, if it's not, we would consider our GCF to be -1, and we'd factor that out. So when we're looking for a GCF, we're also kind of looking to see whether that's negative or not. If it's not, cool. If it is, then we factor out that negative. Does this have a GCF besides 1? All right, then we start going on and counting the number of terms. How many terms do we have? Okay, and in your head, whenever you see 3 terms, boom, goes off. Diamond. So, diamond method. Now, from before, we have 2 kind of types of diamond method. We have one where we can do a shortcut and one where we can't. Which one is this? A shortcut or no shortcut?
No.
Okay, good. But you have to understand that the process is identical. It's the same thing. It's just if this is not there, we have a shortcut that we can choose to do. You don't have to do it. You can choose to do it. It makes your life easier. If that is not one, then we don't have a shortcut. There's nothing else to do besides what we're doing now. Just the grouping idea. So let's go through 2 examples together. And like I said, I'm going to give you a couple to own to practice right now. So diamond problem. Absolutely. Tell me what number goes up top, please.
-22.
I like how it goes with the sign. So -22. True or false? 5 goes here.
No.
What goes here?
40.
And then we start thinking about 2 numbers which add to -22 and multiply to 40. And remember, I can't do this for you all the time, so you're going to have to be good at that. I've taught you the tricks, okay? If that's a positive and that's a negative, these are both negatives. Negative what?
-2 and -20.
This is a kind of nice one. -2 and -20. That's right. We double check before we go any further. So -2 plus -20, we know that's -22. And if I multiply those 2 numbers, it's positive 40. So I know I'm good to go. Don't go any further until you're sure that those are right. Now after that, you know what? I asked it to you, or asked it of you, but I want to make sure you know it. Can I go and do the shortcut right now and just do x minus 2 and x minus 20? No, it's going to fail having the 8x squared. It's going to fail having even the 5. So what that should tell you is, oh my gosh, yeah, well yeah, there is no shortcut here. We're just going to use those 2 numbers which add to your b to split up that middle term, changing 3 terms into 4 terms using the 2 numbers that you just found. And the whole reason why we're doing that, why we're changing 3 terms into 4 terms, is because we learned how to factor by grouping really well. So why not take advantage of that? So change it into 4 terms, and then it's not bad. You don't have to guess and check. There are other methods to do this. I'm not going to lie to you. There are. Some people can do these in their head, and that's cool. But this is kind of a fail-safe that gives you the right answer all the time, and that's really what I'm looking at for you guys. Get the right answer all the time, and give you a way that's mathematically relevant, that you can follow the math, and not just do a little trick. And there are some tricks that actually work, which is awesome, but I want to give you a way that you understand. So, factor by grouping, I'm not going to patronize you by having you do it every single time. I'm just going to walk you through it. So factor by grouping, I'm going to assume that you can factor GCF at this point with no problem, because it's been like 2 weeks, and we should be pros at that right now. So we look for the biggest number is 2, the biggest variable that's shared by both is x, we get 4x, and we get minus 1. Here we're looking at the number, there's no variable that's shared, but the number is 4. That minus forces me to factor out a negative 4, which simply means my signs are both going to change. This becomes a positive.
It's 5.
I messed up. Sorry, I did the math in my head. Pull out the 5. I was thinking about this one already. So 5 goes into both those numbers. This forces you to factor out a negative 5. What that negative's going to do is change both these signs. So this will be positive 4x. This will be minus 1. Here's how you know if you did it right. If you can do this and you're sure you're right, this has to work. It has to be exactly the same, okay? So if you're finding out, man, that's something different. You made a mistake here, not here. Okay, you check this, double check it, and you're right, then your mistake is coming up here. Okay, and that's where you need to focus your work. So we have 2 big terms. I know factoring by grouping says if there's a common factor, we divide that out, create a new set of parentheses because we're factoring. Once we divide it, we put the remaining pieces of those terms, the remaining factors in that second parentheses, and it's completely factored. We can check our work by some simple distribution. Just FOIL it, and it's got to be exactly the same as what you started with. If it's not, then you've made a mistake. Quick head nod if you're okay with it so far. Okay, let's do one more, but I want you guys to guide me through it, okay? I want to know if it's getting easier for you. This might have started off like, oh my gosh, is it getting easier as we're going through them? The more practice you do, the easier this becomes until ultimately in chapter 7, you're like, oh yeah, that's just one small part of what we're doing here. And that's what I want for you. Not where you got to worry about it. Oh my gosh, factoring again? Well, you might still do that, but at least you'll be able to do it. Okay, so we're going to quickly walk through this problem, and I'm going to give you something to do on your own. So first thing we check for, what is that? Is it in order? Second thing we check for, first term, is it positive or negative?
Positive.
That's great. Do we have, what are we looking for?
GCF.
Is there one?
No.
Okay, next thing we check for is what?
Diamond.
Why are we choosing the diamond method here?
Because there's 3.
Good. Is this going to be a shortcut diamond problem or a long diamond problem? Okay, so let's go ahead and do that together. What number goes here?
13.
What number goes here?
Negative 14.
How are you finding the negative 14?
Negative 7.
times 2.
Okay, so the A times the C is exactly right. And then we find 2 numbers which add to 13 and multiply to negative 14. Of course, if you look at it, one of them has to be negative because you're multiplying to a negative. That's the only way that can work. So 2 numbers that multiply to a negative whose difference is 13. These numbers have to be separated by 13. Well, can you think of it?
1 and negative.
14 and 1 somehow, where the bigger one is positive. So 14
Oh, that's right.
and negative 1. Not negative 14 and 1, but negative 1 and 14. Let's double check. Does this add to positive 13? Does it multiply to negative 14? And trust me on this one, you don't want to check your work before you go any further, because if you mess the sign up and don't check it, your problem's smoked. Okay, you're done. So please check that. Okay, now, I asked you before, but can I go directly to my factors with my shortcut? No, since the A is not 1, we have to do the long way. So long way is take those 2 numbers, allow them to separate your middle term. Minus 1x, I don't have a 1, minus x is minus 1x, plus 14x minus 7, and then we're going to group it. I'm going to go a little quickly on this because I'm going to give you opportunity to do this on your own in just a minute. Grouping here, the only factor that goes into both those terms is x. We get 2x minus 1. Here that says plus, I'm factoring out a positive number. No signs are going to change when you factor positive 7. That'll be 2x minus 1. I'm going to check my work real quick. If I have the same thing, I know I've done it right, and that's great. So let's factor that out. We get 2x minus 1, and the remaining factors from these two large terms after I divide out my 2x minus 1 is x plus 7. I would double check that with distribution if this was a test to make sure that I have that right before I go any further. Show of hands if this is making really good sense to you. Cool. I'm going to have you do a couple on your own. So let's do 4x squared plus 12x plus 5. Let's do this one. We are factoring a positive right here. We're factoring a positive 7 out of that because it says plus you have to factor a positive 7. So divided by 7 you get 2x, divided by 7 you get 1. We're dividing. So we check the order, check negative out front if there's not one, cool. Check for GCF if there's not one, no problem. Check the number of terms. 3 terms, diamond problem. Remember that a diamond problem only allows you to break it up to make it 4 terms, to allow you to group. So really we're trying to get to grouping. So use a diamond problem to allow you to make 4 terms out of it. I'm going to get started up here. So these are both in order. They both have the first term positive. You have to have that. There's no GCF in either case. And there's 3 terms, which when you see this on a test and I say factor, you're going to do diamond problem. So this is 12, and we're going to get 20 because we have the a times c gives us 4 times 5, or 20. Now 2 numbers which add to 12, multiply to 20. What's nice, they're both got to be positive. They're both positive numbers. So here we have 10 and we have 2. Does it matter the order in which you have those? It doesn't matter. It's going to factor either way correctly. So what this does, because we have an a that's not 1, it says all you've basically done is set this up so that grouping will work. And that's the whole plan. So we got our 4x squared, cool. We're splitting this up 10x plus 2x plus 5. And then we group it. Here we got a 2x, we got 2x plus 5. Here we, wait a minute.
Switch them.
Do you have to switch them?
Substitute in 10x.
You can.
Couldn't you say plus 1 and then have 2x plus 5?
Sure, yeah. What goes into both those numbers?
Nothing.
1.
Don't you tell me nothing. What divides both of those terms? 1. Yeah, put the plus 1. If you factor out 1, yeah, it's kind of trivial because it doesn't do anything, but you've seen this a couple times now, where if nothing divides both those terms besides 1, put the plus 1. It's not going to change them, but it will allow you to see that you have the same factor here, and when you divide out that factor, you don't have nothing. You have a 1, you have a plus 1. If you change those around, if you switch those around, will you get the same answer?
Yes.
Yes, it'll just be out of order. Does that matter? No, it doesn't matter. Okay, multiplication is commutative, so it does not matter. Okay, next one. By the way, how many people got that one? That's really good. If you guys keep this up, you're going to be pros at factoring. Okay, this is great. If you're struggling with this, it's gonna take some practice. Actually, everyone's gonna take some practice. But keep up the practice. If you get the idea of factoring, that's what's important. Okay, next one. So it's in order, no problem, no GCF. Put your -5, put your +6, and think of a couple numbers which add to -5 and multiply to +6. Keep in mind, what do you know about the signs of both of these numbers? If one's positive and one's negative, what would that be? They're both negative. If they're both negative, will 6 and 1 work, or will 3 and 2 work? 3 and 2. So this is one of those ones with these two numbers, and people kind of get those messed up a lot. Be careful, and when you're sure that you're sure, double check it again. Okay, make sure that you're sure that you're sure. You sure? Okay. Anyway, both negative. We want a couple numbers that add to -5, multiply to +6. The only ones that are going to do it are -3 and -2. Double check it, triple check it, I don't care, but make sure that that is correct. Did you guys get those ones? It's easy to do the 6 and 1 sort of thing, or the 5 and 1 a lot, because you want to make it work like that, but be careful. After that, well, we don't have a 1 there, so this is just allowing us to separate our middle term so that grouping will work. And if we do that, it doesn't matter the order, it's going to work either way. We'll group it. 3x here, we get 2x minus 1. Here, check this out. I wanted to give this one to you on purpose this particular way. What goes into both 2x and 1? 1 does. But this says it's got to be negative. So you're forcing it to factor out a -1. What does factoring a negative do to these two terms? So this will be a positive 2x. This will be a -1. And that's what's giving us the -2x and the +1. Also, you can verify right now. It's so easy to check your work. If you've done this and you know it's right, these have to be the same. If they're not the same, you've made a mistake. And most of the time, it's just a sign error. It's just a negative where it should be a positive or vice versa. So if this works, you have to have these the same. If they're not, you've made a little mistake, go back and fix it. So since we have two large terms, same factor here, we're going to divide that out. 2x minus 1. We'll put the remaining factors in a new parentheses. Factoring always creates parentheses. We get 3x minus 1, and we're good to go. Show of hands if you feel okay with this so far. Now, a lot of students who have had this class before, at high school or somewhere else, and it's been a while, a lot of students really want to try to solve this right now. They want to go, oh, let's set this equal to 0, and set each factor equal to 0 and solve it. This is not what we're doing. Okay, if I haven't given you an equation, don't introduce an equation. It's not an equation right now. It's an expression. We're just factoring. Does that make sense? We will get to the point where we're actually solving, but it's not now. So your answer here is, if I ask you to factor it, here's your factorization. That's it. Tell you what, let's do two more. Let's just practice real well with two more to make sure everyone's good. I'm going to walk around the room. I'm going to make sure that you guys have it, okay? Treat this like a mini test. See if you can do it without looking at your notes. I think I've given you enough opportunity to really go back and forth, right? So let's see if you can do it with that. If not, okay, look at your notes. But see if you can do these two problems without it. And if you can, you know that you know it. You with me? These are going to be a little challenging. Well, one of them's a little challenging because the numbers are bigger. See if you can do it. You may, of course, use a calculator. So if you struggle with finding the factors in your head, no worries. Use your calculator. That's okay. So these are the last two basic ones that we're going to do, and then just like last section, I'm going to give you some special cases where you might see this, where you might see something where it looks like it doesn't originally work, but then we can use this process for it, so that you don't get intimidated by them later on. Okay. So right now, do the best you can on factoring those blindly, without your notes, not blindly like you're not looking at it. Okay, that would be really cool. But you're going to have to look at your paper. So factor as best you can without looking at your notes, and if you get stuck, okay, then use it, but try to do it without it. Also, I want you to think through the process. Think through all the steps I've given you. Are they in order? Is the first term positive? Is there a GCF? How many terms do you have? If it's an extra step diamond problem or if it's a shortcut. Think through that stuff every time. I know that negative 140 is a big number, I get it, but think about what the signs have to be there. Recognize they have to be different signs. Do you see it? That means the difference between there has to be 4. Think about two numbers where the difference is 4 that multiply to 140, okay? And then you'll get it. Okay, I'll tell you what, I'm seeing a lot of people stuck on the first one right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the diamond problem setup for that. I'm hoping that you all made it down to, I know that you did because it's on most of your work. I know you got this, and I know you got this. Okay? Yeah, you can get stuck on these ones if you don't think through it. Listen, you've got to really think about this. If you're multiplying to a negative, one of these things is negative, and one of these things is positive. Do you understand that concept? And they're not both negative, because that would be a positive. Negative times negative is positive. Now, if you have different signs, think about how adding works with different signs. If you add with different signs, you're really just subtracting. So the difference between these two numbers has to be 4. What that means is that one number is only going to be 4 units away from another one. Well, I'm thinking of two numbers which multiply 140 that are 4 spots away on the number line, absolute value-wise. The only thing that's going to work there, well, there's a lot of factors for 140, but the ones that I know that are only 4 units apart are 10 and 14. Do you see what I'm talking about? 10, 4 spots apart. That's, if you have different signs, use that. So for us, I'm going, okay, 10 and 14, which one's got to be the positive one, the 10 or the 14? The 14. Because that's a positive number. It's got to be, the bigger absolute value-wise has to be the positive one. That's how you set that up, okay? From here, I want you to finish this problem, and then I want everyone to be able to do that problem. So go for it.
Another? Another?
Sure. If you feel like challenging yourself just a little bit, do you recall that we did an example very much like that last time, but we didn't have the 14? Do you remember that? It still has 3 terms. There's no GCF. If you're done, I would do these two for sure first, okay? If you're done with these two and you want something a little bit more for the next minute and a half, which is all I'm going to give you, try that one. See if you can set it up. Okay, tell you what, I've given you enough time to either be finished or get really stuck. All right, so we have enough time to have done those two problems. Let's go through them and see how we did, okay? Remember that if you got stuck right now, if you got stuck on there's two ways to get stuck on this. You either get stuck on finding the numbers or you get stuck in the process. What I can't afford for you to do right now is get stuck on the process. The process should be very clear at this point. Is the process clear for you? You understand what to do next, right? That's the process. If you're like, man, I just can't find the numbers, that's different. What my job is to teach you is the process of doing this, how to do it every time without fail, and that's what's going to happen here. If you fail to find the two numbers, that's just take some work on factors and thinking through what works here. So here we go. Those two numbers, they definitely add to 4, they multiply -140. This, because that's not a 1, this only allows us to split up our middle term and then to factor by grouping. After we factor by grouping, if you write out the correct factor by grouping, which I know, problem is done. 7x minus 2, 5x plus 2, those are the only factorizations that's actually going to work there. In either order, that's fine. I want to know how many people were able to make it there on their own. That's really good. If not, that's okay. But try it again later, okay? See if you can go through the process again. Next one. Same thing. It's a diamond problem. It's 11, it's -12. Did you guys get 11, -12? If you set that up correctly, you at least know the setup. Now, find out the two numbers which add to 11 and multiply -12. You gotta use some critical thinking here, okay? You gotta think through it. If that's a negative, one of these is positive, one of these is negative. Has to be. Because a negative times a positive gives you a negative. It's only what happens. Now we think about two numbers. Did you guys get the idea that if your signs are different, the two numbers will be 11 spots apart? If the signs are the same, these two numbers literally add to that one. So if the signs are different, you're kind of subtracting. If the signs are the same, you're kind of adding. So if these signs are different, the difference between them in terms of absolute value is 11 spots apart. What two factors multiply to 12 and are 11 spots apart? 1 and 12. That's it. It's the only thing that's 11 spots apart that multiply to 12. And that's how, with these larger numbers, you can think through it if it doesn't just come into your head. So anyway, which one's negative, the 1 or the 12?
1.
So again, because our A is 4, not 1, this allows us just to separate our middle term and then to factor by grouping. And then check our work. It's the same. I gotta be good to go. 4x minus 1. Put your extra factors here after you factor this out inside of a new parentheses. And this should all be kind of making a lot of sense at this point. Be kind of old at this point. Is it getting that way? Okay. Is it? Okay, I get it. Okay, when I'm doing it, can you follow it? Okay. Are you starting to get to be able to do it on your own pretty easily? That's good. That's where we need to be, okay? Now, this last one, I kind of ran out of room. I'm going to write it over here. I told you if you want something a little challenging to do that one. It's not super bad because it's very similar to something we did in section 6.2. Let's think through it. Let's see if the process still works. What would you check first?
Order.
Yeah, order. And order's a little weird. What I told you about this type of order is put the x squared first, put the x, and then have no x. That's fine. That's at least in some sort of an order. Next thing we check for is the first term positive. Is it? It's great. We want that. Next thing we check for, does it have a GCF?
No.
Never fail to check though. Sometimes it won't. Most of the times for us here, it doesn't. But sometimes it will. If it doesn't have a GCF besides 1, I guess I misspeak when I say does it have a GCF. The answer is always yes. Does it have a GCF that's not 1? No. So we can't factor anything out of it. That wouldn't make sense. So then we start counting the number of terms. How many terms does it have?
Right.
If it has 3 terms, a diamond problem will still work for us. I showed you this last time. What number goes here?
-3.
And here?
Negative 28.
-28.
Do you understand that one of these will be negative? I'm going to put it here just to reiterate one final thing. One of these numbers will be negative and one of these numbers will be positive. Do you guys get that? It's different signs. Hey, how about that? So that means that the difference between these two numbers has to be 3. These factors, find 2 factors that multiply to 28 where the difference between them is only 3. And you'll find it's 4 and 7. It's only 2 factors that are separated by 3. Since the signs are different, you can use that. And the bigger one has to be negative. Let's double check. Does that add to -3?
Yes.
And does it multiply to -28? And should I go do my shortcut or should I separate my middle term?
Separate.
Absolutely. When you're doing this, use the same exact structure as you've done. We just have the 14x squared. We add the 4. Just keep this, x, y. Don't separate those. Don't separate these variables, okay? It's 4xy minus 7xy and then minus 2y squared. If you do that, factoring by grouping works really, really well. Can you verify that this really is the same as that?
Yes.
Okay, and then we continue. Because we have a few more variables, you're going to factor a little bit more stuff, but the idea is the same. We've done so much of this, it should hopefully be making sense. What factors out of these first 2 terms?
2x.
And we get 7x plus
1.
a little bit off.
2y.
2y.
Okay. Here, I did this on purpose to show you one more time that if that's a minus, you have to factor a negative. I want to kind of hammer that home. That way I don't give you all the easy stuff. You'll find that how I set these up normally is I put the negative number first. That way you don't have to factor out the negative, and that you kind of avoid that. But I want to make sure you at least see it. What factors out of these 2 terms, please?
Y.
Negative y. I like how you said negative y, because that forces you to factor the negative y. There's 7x and plus 2y. Why does that sign change?
You pulled up.
You factor a negative.
Factor negative, divide by negative, it changes the sign. If we keep on going, we pull out our common factor, we create parentheses because we're factoring, we put our extra factors that we did not factor out together, and we're done. Feel okay with it? All right. So let's continue a little bit. We're going to just do some special cases, give you the overall what you can do with this and how to go about doing some of these problems. Question?
There's actually 2 ways to do that last one.
Did you get the same answer?
Yeah.
Okay. Were your numbers switched?
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
I used the 7 and the 14 on the grouping.
You 7 and 4. You mean. Oh, sorry. You have this here and this here.
I used 14 and 7. Thanks.
So you have this here and you have this. These are flip-flopped. That's fine. It doesn't matter. In fact, how I would normally do the problem is that way, because I like my if there's different signs, I like my negatives first. That way, I don't have to factor a negative here. So I just show you this every once in a while to make sure you see that if that's a minus, it forces you to factor a negative. Just keep you on your toes. We'll make sure you're here with it. With it? Okay, we haven't done this in a while, so we're going to do this. We're going to start with the left side and go row by row on our steps here. I want you all to really be with me on this. So, left side, you guys, you're my left, by the way, and you're my right, because I get confused. So, first row over here, left side row. What's the first thing you're checking for? You're not the far left row. Okay, so order, yes. Is it an order? Yeah, for the most part. We're going xy squared, and then xy, and then x. Okay, so that row, the next thing you check after order is what?
GCF other than 1.
We are out of order, aren't we, on our order here? That's okay. We do a GCF besides 1. We're also checking when we're doing that to make sure our first term is positive. Now, if you skip the checking for a GCF, this problem explodes in your face, all right? Kind of like my daughter's poop rocket this morning, because she's 8 days old. That's what your paper's gonna look like, and you don't want that, because that's nasty. Alright? So, true story, or whatever. I'm not gonna say it on video, it's nasty. Anyway, 8-day-olds can't really control bowels, apparently. Suckers. So, you check for GCF. You have to factor the GCF, or some of these things get really ridiculous or near impossible, okay? So, this row, is there a GCF in this problem that's not 1?
Yes.
What is it?
3.
X.
Do you see the X?
Yeah.
Don't lose the X. This thing will not be fun, okay? You have to get a GCF. When I say that, I mean you don't make a mistake on it. You get the 3. The 3's pretty easy. Yeah, 3 goes in all 3 numbers. But X goes into all 3 terms as well. 3X is the GCF. You all with me on that one? I cannot stress enough how important factoring in GCF is at the start of this. If I do factor the GCF, we'll go to this row. What are my terms? Say them nice and slow so I can hear you, okay? What's the first term?
2 x
2y squared.
2y plus.
No, squared.
Squared. Okay, very good. You can say them a little faster than that. What's the
I'm
next?
only one.
I know you are. Let's go to someone else. What's the next one besides 2y squared? Plus 11?
Y.
Just 11?
Y minus.
1. Okay, 1. And then someone else in that row. What's that at? So we got 2y squared, we got plus 11y, we got, I know it's going to be minus what?
6x.
6x. 6x?
No, just
Okay, because
Six,
we're
my bad.
dividing the x,
Yeah.
so no x. Can I get a double check on that to make sure that we're right? Are we right? Can you double check it?
Yes.
How easy would it be to double check this right now?
Piece of-
That's it. So make sure that you have that right before you go any further. Okay, always double check. Next row, you guys. Am I done? No, I've just factored GCF. What is it going to take here?
Diamond.
Okay, now the diamond problem that you're referring to, is it going to be the shortcut one where I just go right to it, or am I going to have to split up that middle term? And how do you know that?
Because the A is not 1.
All I heard was over, but I'm assuming that you
Yeah.
said that's not 1, so good, that's right. Okay, next row over. We're going to set up a diamond problem. Can you please tell me what goes up top? Good. And what goes here? Far row, you get the fun job. You get the good stuff. I'm looking for 2 numbers which add to 11 and multiply to negative 12. Yeah, hopefully you saw it up here on the same numbers. Yeah, negative 1 and 12. Go back to this row. You guys didn't even get a chance yet because everyone was speaking for you. I asked them the same question. You're going to get 2 questions. Firstly, can I go directly to x minus 1 and y minus 1 and y plus 12? Is that a good idea? Okay. Tell me exactly what I need to write.
Need to write 3x with parentheses.
Good.
And then 2y squared minus 1y, excuse me,
Sure.
plus 12y, and then minus 6.
Perfect. That's exactly right. Okay, next up. We're going to factor by, what's it called? Let's do that all together, okay? Give everyone a chance now. Can y'all tell me, please, what factors out of 2y squared minus 1y?
1.
And we get,
2y minus 1.
perfect. What factors out of 12y minus 6, please?
6.
That plus is a positive 6. And we get what?
2 minus 1. Y minus 1.
Can you verify that we have done this correctly?
Yeah, because they're both the same.
That's how we know. If we know this is right, then these have to be the same. After that, we're really, really close to done. Only thing we're going to do is continue our grouping. We're going to keep that 3x out front. We're going to have 2y minus 1. We factored that. We're going to have y plus 6. And that's completely factored. We talked about this a little while ago. I think it was, I don't know, a couple lessons ago. Bless you. These brackets, as soon as you're done factoring, are kind of irrelevant. They really don't do anything. So if you want to keep the brackets, okay. But if you want to drop the brackets, that's fine too, because multiplication is associative and commutative. It doesn't matter the order in which we have it. So you can drop them, but keep it in this order. Should fans feel all right with that so far? All right, fantastic.
So when you do the diamond, it doesn't matter if you do the, because I did mine 12 minus 1, I did opposite.
Okay, I think I've said this a few times, but let me reiterate for the last time. It does not matter the order in which you have those numbers, ever. Do you want to try one on your own just to make sure you got it?
Yep.
Okay, after that, I'm not going to give you any more to actually do on your own. I'm just going to go through a few of them. You know what? Now, I might give you one to do on your own at the end. I gotta cover these couple to make sure that you really see it. We're going to move pretty fast on the next 3 examples. The reason why we're going to do that, you already know how to do this stuff, okay? I'm going to give you some special cases on here's your first step sort of idea. That way your factoring becomes easier. You with me? So check it out. If you ever see a factorization where everything is in order, verify order, and your first term is negative. That first term being negative kind of acts as your GCF if no other one is present. So here, 5, 19, 4, there's 2 prime numbers in the 4. They're not going to have a GCF besides 1, but because that's negative, are you listening right now? Don't zone out. Okay, this is important. If that number is negative, you treat your GCF as -1. And you're going to factor that negative out, and basically it just changes all of your signs. So if I divide by -1, positive, positive, negative. Quick head note if you're okay with that one. So do you see how it's changing all 3 of your signs? What that does, it allows the diamond problem to work for you. If you don't do that, it's really hard to do the diamond problem. All right, this makes it easier. So once we factor the negative, then we set up our diamond problem. We're looking for different signs. The difference is 19. That's got to be positive 20 and -1. I said I'm going to go quick on this, okay? So when we do that, we're going to have 5x squared minus x plus 20x minus 4. You can verify those do add to positive 19 and multiply -20. We'll continue our factorization by grouping. Keep your -1 out front. We got x and 5x minus 1 plus 4 and then 5x minus 1. Hey, look at that. We did it right because our factors are exactly the same. So we'll have our negative. We'll have our bracket. We'll have our 5x minus 1 because that's a common factor. We'll have our x plus 4 because those are remaining parts of my terms that I didn't factor out. And that's our final answer. You should really clean this up just a little bit because this has a lot of stuff you don't need. Here's what I mean by this, okay? You don't really need these brackets. You don't really even need that 1. How this should look is 5x minus 1, x plus 4, with just a negative in front of it. And that's appropriate. That negative, it stands for -1. The brackets were just kind of holding this stuff in here until we finished our factoring. And that's just fine. Did I explain that well enough for you guys?
Yeah.
Okay. So 2 more. This one's going to go really quick. Can you check the order for me? Is it good?
Yeah.
Do we have a GCF?
No.
How many terms we got? Diamond. 20 and 100. Can you give me 2 numbers which add to 20 and multiply to 100?
10 and 10.
Now here's a question. Do I have to go through this whole process, or can I go directly to my factors? Can I do the shortcut?
Yes.
Why?
A is 1.
That's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. So this would be x plus 10 and x plus 10. The reason why I'm giving you this example is because this is absolutely right, but we like to make, as mathematicians, things as concise as possible. Now you know that x times x gives you x squared, correct? In fact, any 2 of the same factors that are multiplied together, we can represent that by an exponent. Hence, it's repeated multiplication. Same thing happens here. If we get x plus 10 times x plus 10, we do x plus 10, and then we square it. And that's all I wanted to see out of that problem. Firstly, don't forget there's a shortcut, okay? Because that saves you time. Secondly, whenever you have the same factor twice, just have it as that factor to the second power. So far, so good on that one? Okay. You know what? Maybe I'm going to give you one. I'm going to see how far you can get in a minute. Can you do it? Okay. This combines a couple ideas that we've had already, but just be careful. Go for it. We're not going to have time to do this very last problem, and I'm not going to do it, but I want you to think of something on this problem. Just think about what your first step would be, okay? Can you do that for me? You don't need to do it. Just think about what your first step would be. So I want you to try this one. I'll give you about another minute, and then I want you to think about your first step. Okay, I'm giving you as much time as I can because I got to wrap this thing up here. So first one. Order? Sure. Positive first term? Yeah. GCF besides 1? No. You want it to be. Looks almost like it is, but it's not. You can't do it. So, since there's 3 terms, we do the diamond problem. Oh, I gave you really nice numbers, didn't I? What a nice guy I am today. Look at that. Such a nice guy. -10, -10. Did you find that?
Yep.
Okay. Don't go to the shortcut. Do the grouping, and don't forget that that is an x to the 4th power, and that's an x to the 2nd power. Okay, you've got to split it up like that. So we have 25x to the 4th minus 10x to the... Okay. Does that make sense to you? You've got to have the x squared. After that, our grouping will work just fine. We'll factor out the 5x to the 2nd, and we'll get 5x to the 2nd minus 2. This says you have to factor out a negative. So when I group these, it'll be -2. And what that'll do is change our sign to positive 5x to the 2nd minus 2. And you can see right here, this factors very nicely as 5x to the 2nd minus 2. Oh, wait a minute. And there's another 5x to the 2nd minus 2. Should I leave it like that?
No.
Is it technically correct? Yeah. But we want to make it nice with him. And that's the idea. Should finish feel okay with that idea. Okay, before you go, I asked you for one thing. What's your first step?
Order.
Is it in order?
Yes.
Is your first term positive?
Yes.
What do you do after that? Is there GCF besides 1? Okay, so your first step here is to factor out what? 2. But factor out the 2, you get 4y squared minus 20y plus 25. Can you go, wait, before you go, can you do the rest of that?
Yes.
What would you do? Diamond problem. I'm going to assume you know how to set up the diamond problem at this point. Would you go to the shortcut or do the extra stuff? And that's the whole idea. We actually just finished section 6.4.